Okay,
Others are
5:30.
doing
I
other
will
things,
call
yeah.
the meeting to order. Up first is the Parks Advisory Group concept. Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have an item that's just for discussion related to the Parks Commission and a proposed new model. That would be an advisory group is what we're calling it right now. So, as you'll recall, in 2018, we did the undertaking of the Parks Master Plan, and we had some really great, that was just testing.
Sorry.
Sorry.
That's okay. We had some really great community engagement in the Parks Master Plan process, so people were engaged, they were excited. We came up with some really good brainstorming through that development of that plan. And from there, we have learned through the Parks Commission that things kind of trickle off at that point. So the Parks Commission, I think, is always slated to be something that's kind of fun and creative, and the city process can kind of kill some of that fun and creativity, to be super honest. Although it's a process we all know and love and do diligently, but something that we've been thinking about at a staff level is how can we become more engaging and something that people really care about. So parks are often something that people say, I moved to Carver because of the park system, the trail system. Others options are obviously available, but people are really passionate about our park system. So we've noodled this idea for a while, and the idea that we came up with was a parks advisory group. So we'd open it up to a larger number of people in the community, and we would ask for likely quarterly meetings where we could touch more residents on things like park development. How do we do it? I think that if I were a resident and I didn't do the work that I do, and I saw that the city I live in is spending $1.5 million on a park, when I'm nervous about my taxes going up, that can feel really scary if you don't know about the park dedication fund and how that works and the mechanics behind it. So that's just one example of how we would want to open up our education a little bit, get people to understand some of these mechanics of it. So we would like to talk about like funding and maintenance. So what park dedication can pay for, what your taxes pay for a greater understanding. And then brainstorming. So the Parks Commission does fantastic work, but it's a small group of residents that have different passions, different families, different dynamics. So hoping to get a wider variety of community members in, and looking for feedback also for the city of Chaska. We have a couple events in Carver that are, I would say, kind of run a gamut of being successful, but several of them are canceled due to low registration. So trying to tap in a little bit more to a resident group, asking what type of events do you want, where do you want them, how do you want them, when, just so we can hopefully get increased feedback and increased benefit out of the Chaska ref agreement. So we're hoping to open it up to a larger group. In turn, that would shift some of the work to the Planning Commission. So the formal work that the Parks Commission does, adopting plans, would fall to the Planning Commission, who inherently does some of that work right now through their work in the comp plan and then development review. They get to know these projects a little bit better than Parks Commission and probably honestly the City Council, just because that's what they're tasked with, is full development review. So the concept would kind of bust open the Parks Commission to the resident advisory group. We'd hopefully get some more participation, shift work to the Planning Commission, hopefully get increased feedback. Also, a goal would be to plan some more events, like I don't know if I was here when the tree sale happened, but I hear a lot about the tree sale. So thinking about how we could revive that if this group would be interested in that. Brent has floated the idea of potentially becoming a tree city, so maybe that group could be tasked with what it takes to become a tree city. That requires like an Arbor Day event or an Earth Day event, just hoping to tap into some community, build some relationships. I'll open it up for discussion.
All right. Thoughts?
I want to know more about the tree city. I might just have to Google, like, if it aligns with the green steps. No, I've been kind of following this along, so none of this is surprising, just because I've been on the Parks Commission. And I like the direction of an advisory group. I just think that's good wording, too. Those are my thoughts.
Glenn?
I'm all ears right now.
Okay. Sure. I like the idea. I like the wider audience. I like maybe mixing up, people who are part of it, maybe over time, especially depending upon topic specific. just to get some variety of input in the community. And I like the education piece, right? Talking about what park dedication does, and and maybe if we mix up residents over time, we get more education out there. I like the idea of also planning events, especially tied to our parks. Now that, with Ironwood expanding, we had a lot of inventory of parks and trying to maybe improve or enhance, our offering there. So, like those ideas, for sure. Christy?
I'll just follow up with the recreation part of it and our parks. What Chaska has been offering in Carver right now is generally they take like a Carver County class and they just offer it here. There isn't a connection between residents and who, they're not building that community feeling. It's just getting farmed out from the county to us. Not that the county programs aren't wonderful, and having one or two of those might be something, but I've been watching it over the last number of years, and really that's all that we're kind of getting at this point. The one thing that we didn't was like the yoga in the park, and that was probably the most highly attended thing that we had. But that's a more personal experience, I think, for the community than having just kind of a regurgitated program that is just brought from the county, plopped here, and then again we have low enrollments, it gets canceled, so there's nothing going on. So I like the idea of trying to make some of those connections when it comes to utilizing our parks and having somewhat more of a community feel to it. That appeals to me. I have a logistical question about like decommissioning the Parks Commission. So how does that, we have commissions set, so how does that work? What does that look like?
So, sorry,
Okay.
it's embedded in our ordinance, so it'd be an ordinance amendment that would likely take place early January.
It would coincide, so the council last year asked for commission terms to be changed to.
Oh, I remember that long.
That was a hard discussion.
That one was a tough one, it has a lot of math.
And like the date, so in addition to that, there are, the days that they meet, so it would more or less be we would incorporate this change into that ordinance as kind of a global change.
Is there anything else coming up on the docket, let's say in this next year, that you can see is going to be a big project? Obviously, as things come up, we don't know about, but is there anything, like, we had obviously the Parks Master Plan that's completed. Is there something else big that you can foresee that's coming?
I would say Ironwood was a big lift, and then Dave and I have been working with Great River Greening. If you'll remember, Creekside Park got a pretty significant grant for like creek cleanup. So I would say that work could maybe start in the next year, but would likely be kind of like a community event. We need to give some volunteer hours, so it would be volunteers getting out there, some organization for an event. But beyond that, I think Ironwood was our heavy park lift for the next couple of years.
Okay, so you don't, if we choose to decommission the commission, then we don't have we're not going to be missing something that's coming up that we're maybe not prepared, like some big thing, some big project that's coming that you can't foresee anything right now.
No.
Okay.
I would add though that part of the work, if the council chose to move forward with this, would be educating the planning commission and making sure that they were prepared. And so having that window of maybe not a big project provides the space to get them updated on the park dedication plan, the park master plan, and so on and so forth. But getting them used to commenting more on trails and parks and preliminary plat projects, etc.
Okay, that's it. I like this a lot. I think I've shared with a lot of folks in this room that after the summer of 2020, I heard from some Parks Commission members, because that was like right after we did the Parks Master Plan. And because we're really good with our commissioners of not meeting just to meet on the second Thursday or whatever it is, we cancel meetings. And there was a stretch, which just so happened to coincide with COVID, but we truly didn't have any business to discuss for the Parks Commission. So there was a period of like, you're in 6 months, is that too much? It was a stretch. And the Parks Commission members were feeling really unengaged and out of the loop. And so I got that feedback. I think this is a good way to ensure that we don't go those long stretches without meeting, and that we have folks who, I think it's kind of a fine line between recognizing that folks who volunteer and not wasting their time to come here and meet for 13 minutes versus, like not meeting and not feeling like you're doing anything when you agreed to come and volunteer. I also like this, because if you look at the participation, when we had the open house for Ironwood Park before Thanksgiving, we probably had 10, 12-ish residents participate. And if you look at the engagement in that versus even like the truth and taxation hearing, which again is not apples to apples, but everybody who lives in Carver kind of got an invitation to that meeting as well when they opened their preliminary, tax bill. So again, not apples to apples, but I think there's a lot of interest, and I like the idea of getting more people engaged. And if you look at it kind of strategically, maybe it's a feeder for folks who are new to the community. I got involved with the Parks Commission because I was new to Carver and I wanted to get involved. I wanted to start volunteering. And I think that this is a good way to let more than just our 9 people serve on the Parks Commission and get them involved. And maybe it's a feeder for Lions, or maybe it's a feeder for the Steamboat Days Committee, or maybe it's just a feeder for getting to know your community a little bit better. So I really like the idea of kind of giving the opportunity to more folks to get involved.
I was gonna mention too, way back when we did the streets downtown here, we got a grant from the county for our walkability study, and we had a task force that worked on it. And we had a lot of people who were really engaged. And the Parks Commission at that time was part of it, but we asked the community people who wanted, and we had probably, I want to say we had no more than 4 meetings, if I remember correctly, to go, first tell them what it is, get their engagement, and then they actually split up in groups. Mickey Webb walked around with a stroller to see if she could maneuver town downtown with a stroller. But because it was a short period of time, we had a lot of people come out, really gung-ho, really engaged, and then they completed the task. And that was what we needed. So I do kind of like that more task force advisory committee project, because I think people will engage really strongly. And because if things go on too long, sometimes that excitement wanes, right? So it can wane. So I think this model actually, for my opinion, is worth a go to see how it can work, especially if we aren't looking at a huge load right now, and just that bringing in more people, right? And then having them really hyper-focused on something, and then everyone has busy lives, right? Like, everyone's busy.
It doesn't seem like a daunting commitment to commit to
You might get more
2 years
people
or
who say,
whatever.
I don't have to go for 2 or 3 years. I can go for 5 meetings, 4 meetings, whatever, so.
I like it too. I think a lot more people will be engaged. And like Christy said, they'll be focused. It's not long drawn out. There's not the commitment of 2 years of every Tuesday night I gotta be here.
That's not their commitment, but yes.
Well,
We know
once a month, they don't feel like they're locked in, and they can feel more open about what's going on in the parks, so I like it.
And I think, like the example of the walkability study, it's cool that they can give feedback and be part of a project and then see the trail down JCP between 4th Street and the county road and say, my fingerprints on that. I helped make sure that, I identified that there wasn't a trail there when I moved here. Right now there's one.
Mm-hmm.
So I like it. I think we need to be careful how this is communicated to the Parks Commission, and that it's not a, punishment. It's not you didn't do a good enough job. It's just us looking to try a different flavor of engagement in our
My hope
community.
too, that group is fantastic. They're really a fun group of people. I hope that changing the model a little bit can bring back some of that fun. Not to say that the meetings aren't engaging and we're working on exciting things, but they can feel a little bit sterile when you're working through an agenda. So my hope would be that they would join us on the advisory group, bring some history of what we've been working on, and mentor some people through the process.
Is the Parks Commission aware that we're talking about this, besides the fact that they looked at our agenda?
I had some feedback from one of them, but no, we haven't shared it with them at this point.
Okay.
Well, they had a huge task of the comp plan, and they did a remarkable job with that, so we gotta give them kudos for that. But this will also just bring in more people, and we want them to be a part of it as well.
Yeah, I always write thank you notes to the folks who apply for our commissions and don't make it. And, it's awful to say, you really wanted to do something, except we had 12 people apply for 2 spots on the Parks Commission or whatever, you know, so I feel like this is a better way of engagement. And, you know, we've all heard the people, I moved here 6 months ago and I want to get involved, and we're like, thank you, no, we don't have room for you. This will help eliminate some of that. So, all right, do you have what you need from us?
I do.
I think we like it, okay. Moving on, the 2020 appointments discussion, Mr. Merrick.
We have the first resolution of the year that you adopted your first meeting is the organization resolution. And when we have the opportunity, the council has traditionally discussed that at the meeting previous to that first meeting, just to kind of get a lot of the process out of the way. So if you can build some consensus out of the areas highlighted in yellow, then we can have the final organization resolution prepared for your first meeting in January.
Keep scrolling.
So we have one for acting mayor, one for a liaison to the HPC, a liaison to the Parks Advisory Group, liaison to the Planning Commission, Carver County Leaders, the liaison position for the Southwest Transit Board, Southwest Transportation Alliance, 2 for the Township Fire Board, and 1 for the Carver Business Alliance. So if you can have your discussion about who's going to take or negotiate, what have you, we'll keep track of that and then have that for your first meeting in January.
All right. Let's start from the bottom up. I want to do the Carver Business Alliance again. Anybody else?
I would like to, but the meeting time as it currently is in the morning is becoming near impossible for me to meet. So unless we were to change the
I'm
meeting
good
time.
with that.
Okay, we don't need to have 2,
Yeah.
but I kind of thrust myself in there.
That's
and it
fine.
works because I think we can have up to 2.
That's fine.
I'm fine
You
with
can
it.
take
Carver
me-
Business Alliance, going once, going twice. Sold. Township Fire Board.
I'm in.
I'd like to stay on it too.
All right. Anybody else?
I would, but we can see where the other things, where need is too.
Okay, we'll put a pin in that, as some corporate folks say. The Southwest Transportation Alliance. Lori, that was you.
Yes,
don't
and I
think you-
really had
back.
I didn't connect with the gal that was sending the invites till towards the end, so I wasn't always aware.
When are those meetings?
Yeah.
Those are generally Friday mornings at like 7:30, and I think they meet every other month,
Super.
quarterly.
Yeah, sometimes the cadence is a little bit off.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was hard to
it's-
get a pattern.
Not a super regular cadence.
No.
But they always send emails letting you know when the next meeting is.
Time slot doesn't work for me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, let's just hold on that one, because that we can flesh out, because if I were to go off the township board, I could take that one, but I don't particularly want to come off the township board,
Okay.
so.
Okay, Southwest Transportation,
I will
Southwest
stay on
Transit.
that because there's,
Because you're in the depths of it.
Yeah.
I'm in too deep.
Okay, anybody else?
I'm good with that.
Going once, going twice. Sold to Joy McKnight. All right, Carver County Leaders. That was Christy and me. But that's an early one. I'm happy to do that one again,
How often do they meet?
quarterly,
Is it early mornings?
7:30. And I think it's generally Tuesday mornings.
Yes.
Okay, nobody's gonna arm wrestle me for that one. Going once, going twice.
Nope.
I'm on Carver County Leaders. The Planning Commission.
I would love to stay on the plan commission.
Anybody else interested? Going once, going twice. Mr. Henry just bought himself Planning Commission. The Parks Advisory Group
We're all a part.
in their inaugural year.
I would like to stay involved, and maybe it is something where we need more than one council member. I don't know how we're gonna shape that.
We'd have to,
how
would we
you-
have to,
I would like to continue to do, if you can't make it to a meeting, send Brent an email so
Okay.
that he can reach out.
Yeah.
You know, because stuff pops up, but I think we need somebody who will regularly
Regularly, yeah.
be their contact and be that connection between the council
Yeah.
and the.
And I have a feeling it's like too early to think what the dates, times, because we're possibly a quarterly.
I'd say probably quarterly to maybe 6 meetings a month.
But we
A
can
month?
keep with the kids.
A month?
So
A year?
maybe
I could
years.
I could see a couple
There's
fast
commitment.
days. I mean, I think it'll really depend on the group.
Mhm.
What? So,
And the
But-
tax.
yeah. So I guess, but that doesn't change my thoughts at all. Yeah, I would still like to
Okay.
stay part of that.
Anybody else interested? Going once, going twice. Lori's on the Parks Advisory Group. HPC.
And I'm happy to stay. We're really getting into the meat of stuff now and really,
Yeah.
and I don't wanna leave now. I'm too far in.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's, I'd like to kind of see this through. All the things that I were hoping for are starting to come to fruition, so.
Okay. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. I'm looking for an arm wrestling match, guys. Acting, okay, so that's Christie on the HPC, acting mayor.
I would love to do it again since I've never done it, because I've never missed a meeting.
Is that the job? Is that the job?
Yeah.
Just running meetings?
Yeah, and signing.
Oh, sorry, there's
when-
other
if
responsibilities.
Maybe if Courtney goes on vacation, we need something signed last minute, then
He doesn't go on vacation.
I don't think it happens very often.
It happens never so far.
I believe that when I ran for this role, I knew we'd meet the first and third Mondays. Fine around it. Okay, anybody? No arm wrestling match for that one either? Oh, that's because.
Boy,
You're
we
good
made a
arm
lot of
wrestling.
changes there.
All right, acting mayor. So, is Christie. So we need to go back.
Southwest Transportation.
And the fire board.
Oh, and fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to have a liaison to the alliance if no one wants it. We can just take it on as a staff role and provide updates as available and applicable.
Is there something pressing large going on intense right now with the alliance that it seems? Well,
In the past, it's been, I think at least in my opinion, it's been primarily based on the city's interest in seeing 212 expand to 4 lanes. So a lot of work has been done. There's probably gonna be additional advocacy, but maybe less so on 212 and more to Highway 5 and other kind of brother and sister roads, if you will, in the areas.
Do we have to name someone specific, or can we be aware of the meeting? And, no, I mean, sometimes,
Yeah.
Joy, it doesn't work for her, but maybe one time it works for me. I mean, do we have to have someone specific, or can we decide, oh, none of us can make it, Brent will go, or do we not want it at all, or do we want it?
I'm happy to do it. I've gone to the last handful of those meetings, just because I'm curious. But yeah, if nobody else seems to be interested, swing it really down. You were gonna say you're interested?
No, I was just, no, I was going to say if, for some reason, I wanted to gauge how strongly you feel about the fire board.
I am interested just to learn more about the relationship with the townships. And so it's not maybe even just have to be fire board, but, and I want to carry my load otherwise, but it is kind of hard to really, divvy it out, so. And that's twice a year? So maybe otherwise just, I'd be in the first on the list too, if you guys need an alternate.
I mean, that works. I don't want to hog it, I've been on it for a while. I enjoy it, but that doesn't mean.
Yeah, I don't
Why
have
don't we
any.
do this? Why don't
Yeah.
I be your first alternate? Why don't you take the fire board then?
Okay.
And then if something comes up and you're not available, since I have history of being on the fire board,
Yeah.
then let me know and I'll go instead, because the meetings are easy for me to make, the timing, and they're only twice a year, so.
Okay.
How about if we do that? Does that work?
All right. If we have everything, is everybody happy?
Sure.
Are you sure is a non-committal?
It's
fine.
It's fine.
I'll be fine.
Okay, I feel good about this too.
Did we have any thoughts about the attorney?
Oh, yeah, we did.
So
That
I'm
wasn't
sorry.
Thumbs up for me, Dave.
I typed you in already.
So I'm sorry, Courtney,
It's
you're going
eight.
to be Lionston? Is that right? You're going
Yeah,
to
I can
be
work
Lionston?
that. Unless you're dying to do it.
I'm not, but
Okay.
if you can't make it, let me know.
Okay, okay. Okay, we're all in a good place there. Yeah, all right. Moving on to trunk area charges discussion. Ms. Smith?
This was so fun because it was a group project, but I got all the credit on the agenda. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a group effort. I think Dan
I was like,
actually,
your
I'm just
trunk
a
area
clicker
charges
right
are
now.
really exciting.
I think Dan actually kicks off the slides too, so he gets some credit tonight.
All right, well, moving forward here, we're into the trunk area charge discussion that we talked about a while back. It was really an intro to the whole concept. Just to bring you up to speed on what is a trunk area charge. So we're really here to revisit that and say, all right, where would we go next? I think there was some interest in whether or not this was a good thing for the city, whether or not it was necessary. So we're really going to try and fill in the blanks on what would be next. And so we'll walk you through some of those next steps and try and answer some of the questions that we heard at the last discussion. So we're going to start it with same things that you heard before. Why is trunk area charges being discussed? Definitions and applicable examples, some legal authority to do so, and example calcs and area charge study needs, and then finish this off with some next steps and implementation. So that's what you're going to see as we walk through this.
So a question of why are we doing this now? What does it look like? Why is this important work right now? So inventory in Carver right now, as you know, is really good. We've had back-to-back kind of incredible years for permitting, but with those incredible numbers come less lots because people are moving here, choosing to live in Carver. So what that means is that we are in several ways running out of developable land, both in the city and directly adjacent. So obviously for annexation, the property owner needs to be willing and petition for annexation. The city does not proactively go out and say, knock on the door and say, hey, we're ready for you. Sell us your land or sell to a developer. So it's in the hands of the property owner, which I think can be challenging for some reasons, but also really fantastic that they have the opportunity to make that choice when it's right for them and their family. So what we're looking at right now is truly opportunity. The projects that we've seen in the past several years primarily have been west of Jonathan Carver Parkway near Carver Elementary. And once we hit the preserve and Timber Creek, we start to hit some property owners that have indicated they'd like to stay there long term. Great, their prerogative. So we would like to bust this open a little bit, see where there's other opportunity, get council's feedback to see what you're interested in. This also helps us avoid making decisions about large-scale projects based on property owners who might say to me, 1 year, I want to stay here for the next 100 years, and then they hear what a developer might be selling or buying for, and all of a sudden they're ready to go. So just locking in a little bit some of our direction, knowing where we're going, having our consistent why we're wanting to move forward with trunk area charges. Slide. So an update, at the previous meeting, I had the same slide and it showed how many permits were available in each development. So as of October 7th, about 2 months later, I did this on December 8th. In the meadows at Spring Creek, we were at 48, we're now at 29. Meridian Fields had 1, Meridian Fields is done now, so we're at 0. Oak Tree went from 18 down to 11. Hawthorne Ridge went from 9 down to 3. So this is consistent with the permitting we've been seeing in the past several months. And if you think about when I made the Planning Commission meet probably 12 times in the span of like 4 months, we planted so many lots in 2018 and they're essentially gone. And that felt like kind of our biggest year ever, the explosion of it. And if you think about that, just 3 to 4 years later, construction is complete on most of those projects. So we have some new exciting projects coming in, obviously. Timber Creek is huge. The Preserve is a great new product with a new builder. We're working through the Gilbert property with Manley Development right now. So there is still some opportunity in city limits, but we're starting to get kind of an itch of saying, okay, in 3 more years, what does that look like if we had all of this development in 2018 and it's essentially gone?
Can I ask you one question, Erin?
Yeah.
So with kind of this looming, that inflation is going to be rising, have you heard any projections or models that might be different, that might have changed very recently since we talked about this, about what we can look for building next year?
I would say a broad swath, maybe, but I think Carver's an outlier in that. We haven't, I suspected in 2020 that our building permits would nosedive and we'd have kind of a rocky year for permits. but it's been the opposite, where I think many people are seeing some opportunity here to get a larger home, to join a community with a great elementary school, some different offerings than other cities have. So I would say generally some cities might take a hit, but Carver somehow has evaded that, and I think we're going to continue evading that.
Thanks.
So we're going to talk tonight and probably for the next several months if we move forward with this project about 2 different areas. So north we're calling the Big Woods area. So if you think about this area, it's where we are going to connect someday with Victoria and Chaska. Both of those cities are working pretty hard in these areas. So if we choose to go north, we'll connect on some of their synergy, connect potentially with some developers that might be looking for some more land that we could offer. So a cross-jurisdiction project could happen. Something to think about this project that I would ask you to consider pretty hard is that according to our comp plan, this area is zoned for commercial and industrial mix. Obviously something that we want in our community, but something we historically have struggled with in our market. We have Fleet Farm, we have Quick Trip, Lakeview, the next step's Child Care Center coming in, and then Carver Square. But that's not really a hot market for us right now. So thinking about moving north, we might need to change our angle a little bit. Think about the types of projects we'd want to see in that area. Where the second area, which is south of town, so south of the Bluffs, is single family, which I know we want to say we have projects of every type in the zoning code, but single family truly has been our bread and butter for the past several years. So it's important to keep in mind this project can seem exciting if we think north, we'll get these big retail stores, but we hear over and over that rooftops breed commercial. Do we need more rooftops? Moving south takes us there to get additional single family. So thinking about these 2 areas as we continue the presentation, moving north to Big Woods or south, I'll talk a little bit about landowners in both areas just to get some anecdotal feedback. So as part of the discussion tonight, we were tasked with reaching out to some of the property owners in these areas. I had some really great discussions with people. I know people in the south pretty well. This north, I had some question marks about who was up there. Who knew? It was mostly Wickenhausers, different names. So I had some really good conversations. I reached out to about 12 property owners. 7 reached back out to me to say, I want to learn more. What are you talking about? These are my plans. So again, this area is a mix of commercial industrial. We focused on our outreach on larger tracts of land and then just the smaller ones that are incidental. Just thinking about those big users that would be coming in. So if you think about a large commercial developer, they're not interested in something that's the size of a single family lot. So we're thinking about large tracts of land that could develop into these larger projects. So what we would need would be buy-in from fewer property owners. Instead of a neighborhood of 20, we would need maybe 2 people if they have 2 properties directly adjacent to each other. So all conversations I had with these 7 people were really positive. A lot of them have followed up with me like, hey, you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet? So it seemed like they were eager and excited, potentially making some plans on their own about their future in this area. So moving north, I think, would be really welcome by most of the people that I spoke with in this area.
And by positive, generally that means, sure, if somebody came knocking, we would hear them out.
Correct. I think it was helpful when they asked, like, well, how much are you getting next to Carver? And like some of those numbers of the acreage, what people are getting for the acreage, kept it really general. I said, all depends on 100 things. Don't quote me on this ever. Sorry if that scares you.
Plausible deniability.
I think so many of them are removed enough from Carver that they don't see how quickly things are developing here and how land is really at a premium. That if you own acreage at this point, you're in a really good spot. So had some really good conversations, made some really good connections. So even if this project doesn't move forward in the next year or 2 years, I can confidently say in 5 years, if we have someone looking for 10 acres, I have some connections up here that we can reach out to and just see if they're still interested. Next, thank you. And then south, a project we talk about quite often, and we talk about Summergate and Casey and all of the projects that he's doing around the metro. Timber Creek was his last one in Carver, so the Lennar project with 350 units. And similarly, when I called Casey and told him about this idea, he gave me the like, finally, I've been waiting for you. So both North and South were really interested groups, which I think was helpful just to keep this conversation, at least at our level, pretty neutral, that we can make decisions based on the facts of it instead of thinking about some of the property owners. So this is a concept that Casey shot to us in 2020. The area that he either has land under contract or willing property owners. So thinking about a project with him likely could be about 1,200 lots when it comes to full fruition. That obviously wouldn't be year one. Something else we've mentioned is that one of our parks in the Parks Master Plan is in this area. So it's directly south of that Maplewood Road line. So it's the Tollefson, the 40 acres. We have that slated right now for our large-scale community parks where we move some of the ball fields. So single family in this area, but potentially a large city project that could also go hand in hand with it.
So I don't see any thumbs up on the.
They're all thumbs up.
Oh, okay.
What
That's
does
outline.
purple star mean?
I don't know what the purple star is. It's not up
That's my
there.
next question.
So Summergate has all of these properties that are called out here?
Either under contract or they're a willing property owner with Summergate.
Got it, okay.
The Tollefson ones would be under their control.
Red.
I'm sorry, say that
The
again?
the ones that are marked Tollefson,
Yes.
that's what they were for,
That's what they're formerly known as?
or they, I don't think Tollefson exists anymore, but now it says
Okay.
Summergate, they own that. I think
Okay,
the other properties, that either they have purchase agreements or some type of contract, or as Aaron said, they're a willing property owner.
So Tollefson is a corporate owner, it's not a family name?
I think that it started as a family but went corporate.
Okay, so they are not privately owned right now.
There's no such thing as Tollefson right now.
Okay.
Think of it as Summergate.
Yeah,
Cross
Tollefson
that
is just what they
Tollefson.
started.
There's not a human being living on those
No.
lots right now, okay.
There's no Jim Tollefson sitting there. I don't
Thank you,
think. Not even Steve.
Sorry, there might be, but I think they have those under contract that they would say, hey, we're moving forward.
Technical, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So still Steve and Bob Tollefson are not living.
Right. Right. Next slide.
All right, so Aaron covered a big question that came out of our last discussion, which is, what do the property owners think of this? We are talking about charges that would be ultimately levied to the property owners that are benefiting from this. So the big question is do they want this? And so that was number one on the list, is to try and get a handle on, is this supported? Because ultimately, that's what we're doing this for. It's for the property owners. So we're gonna tackle again what is a trunk area charge real briefly, because I think you have a pretty good feel for that. And then we'll go through some of the other questions that we talked about last time. So the trunk area charge, again, just as a refresher, it's a major system expansion cost that's distributed to the benefiting area, or to a benefiting area paid back through future development connection charges. So just think of it as a job that benefits a part of the city, but not the whole city. It's largely for a certain area, a service area. Cost of that job would get distributed to the benefit properties through charges that would be paid back over the course of many years through development. So it's specific to a project and specific to a service area. And so that's first question that we answered last time. And as a refresher, why was Casey asking us about this? He's been looking at the ability to develop the south for years, and he's got his parcel down there. He's got his cost to develop, and then he's asked us this: what do we have to do to get sewer and water down there? And we said it's this long, this far, this much cost. Adds that to his numbers on his first development, and suddenly that development no longer cash flows, and then you would be locking up the rest of the area because that sewer and water doesn't serve the first one, doesn't get paid for, and you really can't develop the whole area. So that's the roadblock that exists when you're first developer in with a major project in the way of making it happen. And so it's unique to the north and the south area right now. There's really nothing contiguous about them. There's nowhere else to get sewer and water services that's nearby. There's going to be a big pull for investment in order to get those areas served. So southwest here, this is with the area charge system. We've got trunk area charge is set up in place from the study that we talked about. So now we have a cost to develop, to put sewer and water services in. We've got whatever number you want to put in there. But it's established through an area charge. So he wants to develop his parcel. We tell him here's the charge. Instead of here's the cost of that infrastructure that you'd have to pay for. Here's the charge that this first development would be associated with. That's a smaller dollar amount, because you are expecting that once the sewer and water comes in, that you're gonna have some contiguous growth around there. So you get your first 5 years of investment for perhaps paid for on this sewer and water system. Then you would be bonding or you'd be cash flowing that. Then ultimately you'd be repaying with the contiguous development is how that works, and that opens up the whole service area. So that was an exercise we went through last time to explain how this happens and why it makes a difference. But I will stop for any questions at this point. Does everybody get a good feel for what an area charge is and why?
Can you just confirm back for me, the trunk area charge is set up, is applied when we kick this off or when the property is developed?
The first step is establishing the charge system,
Yep.
but it's the first development that comes in. It's just when you
Okay.
bond and pay for the project, you're on your way. That's when it happens. It
Yeah,
happens
yeah, yeah,
with the
but
first
I'm
development.
They only pay
And
when,
They only pay when it gets developed.
correct.
Okay, that's not, I was not necessarily speaking of the city, because I get how the city's
Oh.
bonding is gonna work, but when the property owner, when are they paying the city?
I
It's
can-
when it
yeah.
gets
And then
developed.
almost all circumstances, when a project like this occurs, it won't be in city limits at the time. And
Right.
so, they will only pay that fee once they're in the city,
In the city.
have a plan,
Okay,
going through that. And some of
Okay.
that nuance and kind of timing we'll have to work through with Dave. Am I missing anything or overstating anything?
No, I mean, effectively, these are connection charges, so you won't pay it until you're getting your development approved and you
Right.
have to connect.
right,
And you can't connect unless the system exists.
Right.
So, that last slide, I think, maybe it was a little confusing because it looked almost as if they were paying, or you were establishing charges that they were paying before you
Yeah,
even do
no.
the work, but that.
so I get that, okay, so I have one more detailed question. So when we set up this system of the trunk area charge, we say this property's here.
Yeah.
It's this project, it's gonna be this number of dollars, this is how much per unit, we're gonna charge. Are the property owners all signing off on that?
No.
How, it's just something that's established by the city? You
Yeah.
don't have to get them to say, yes, we're in, or no, we're not, okay?
So the city kind of is basically functioning as kind of the city and kind of almost like a bank, frankly, where we're paying for the infrastructure costs up front, and we only get paid back once that development
Right.
occurs. Their choices in whether or not they choose to develop and need city sewer and water services.
Okay, but the developers would be aware that the property was under the trunk area charge area,
Yes, and so that's why like the
potentially.
property owners don't owe anything to begin with.
Right,
It creates an opportunity for them to sell their property, probably under a different category where water and sewer is available.
yes, okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'm good now.
Yes, so do we charge by the acre at the one time then?
We haven't
what
worked
talked
through it
about-
yet.
Yeah, there are different options. You can either do it by acre, but I think what at least we've talked about to this point is how many units we're using REUs,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so for residential, it's easy. You have a single family home that's one unit. Commercial and other things get a little more complicated, but most cities will use the Met Council's model for determining the number of units. And so that's the other option that I think we're more inclined to pursue, and that's probably the easiest one because given the comp plan and the guiding, how the properties are set up, we can look at that, look at densities, and figure out how are we gonna pay ourselves back for this based on units.
So for any property, we would look at it and say to ourselves, how many residential units could go there, even if it's a fleet farm? And we would take that number and that would be the units. So it's the same across the board, whether residential or commercial.
Got it.
Are we gonna apply this fee to just one parcel, or will there be an area where it's a number of parcels?
An area,
Okay.
and so you might get the first parcel that's gonna be paying the first chunk of this, but then you're waiting as the rest of it develops, so it'll be an entire area.
And it's a set fee for all the parcels?
Yep, you distribute the entire area that benefits from that infrastructure. And that might go out a long ways, so.
And it might help too to, tonight, it's ironic, we have the fee schedule update on the council agenda. It goes in your fee schedule, so there'll be
Oh.
area-specific charges in your fee schedule, so when developers and other folks look at your fee schedule, they'll see all the different utility charges, connection charges, you'll have a list of area-specific ones for that southern area or the northern area. And that'll just be in addition to whatever other fees they have to pay. If that makes sense.
That's helpful, I didn't quite realize that, thank you. Okay,
All good?
Mm.
Okay.
I have a question,
Yeah.
this might be for Dan. On one of the slides before the horse one, where it had the red one more up.
Sure.
It took me a second to catch that one,
Yeah,
but I
I
got it.
like that.
Now I
Go
love
back
it.
through the animation here, what? How
It's
far
the
back?
slide above it, actually, the what and why.
16.
Yeah, so the third bullet point down, I don't know if I'm like just trying to read into it or take it too literal. Charges above and beyond standard connection.
It is, so when a property develops, they already have to factor in a charge to connect to sewer and water. That's part of your rate system. What we're doing is we're saying, here's an incremental charge over and above that. So let's just pick a number. They pay $2,000 to connect up.
Okay.
And we say it's gonna be an extra $300 for this area. They're gonna pay $2,300, and we'll give you a little calculation on that in a little bit. But
Okay.
that's what you're doing, is you've got an incremental charge above for every single property connection that happens in that area.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yep. So I'm gonna go back to your. All right, Karen, this is yours.
So, funny side note, Brent is often my gut check of like, is this PowerPoint dumb or is it funny? And this one
Yeah,
was
it's great.
borderline.
Okay,
So the fact that Lori got it,
We're gonna remember it.
that made me happy.
Only because I didn't get it, because I flipped through, I was like, I don't know what that's.
It took me a second.
I don't know if they're gonna just be a while too, so.
It's like grocery shopping?
Or- Karen's really into Yellowstone, so she wants to.
Oh, you just put RIP on there and we'll be fine.
Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about how to communicate this in a way that makes sense. Like, why are we doing this? What does it mean? Why is it important now? Are we thinking about this in a logical way? So the approach of moving forward with an area charge, it is proactive. We don't have projects that are available right now, but we know collectively as a group, projects will happen. Like, I think the past 10 years in Carver show, beyond anything, projects are going to happen. So I think one of the hardest part of the job of everyone in this room is thinking about Carver residents today, Carver residents in 10 years, and Carver residents in 50 years. That a lot of the work we do impacts people now, but also generations that we don't even know exist. So thinking about how this applies, we think about projects in pretty long-term goals, like the water treatment facility is a really good example. So I think day one, it probably felt really scary, like, what are we doing? This is expensive. Why are we thinking about this? But we have to. Otherwise, it comes down to projects not being able to be approved. So if we weren't moving forward with the water treatment facility, would we get another Timber Creek? And we would say, can't take you, we don't have water. So thinking about those projects, at least for me personally, at first it can feel a little bit like we're throttling really hard. But you think about everything that we think about when we work on those plans. We have our capital improvement plan, our long-term financial plan, our comp plan, permit history, market conditions, the Met Council, the census. So I talk about my crystal ball a lot, Courtney talks about it. And oftentimes it can feel like we're taking a shot in the dark, but when you consider all of the things that we have behind us that are telling us projects are going to happen, it starts to make this add up. And I think become an opportunity that's exciting to be able to say, in 5 years, we thought about this area and we knew it was going to happen. It's like putting the horse before the cart or the field of dreams. Like, if you build this infrastructure, they will come. So that has helped me reframe it when it feels a little bit like, what are we doing? Just thinking about everything that we have, the plans that we have, the plans that we adopt, the experts that we lean on, whether it be Bolton and Mank or Steve McDonald. It's a group of people that collectively come at it with an expert approach that tell all of us this work is important to do today for a project in 10 years. So I think that it's helpful to think about this now, just knowing there are willing property owners and we're starting to run out of land, which feels crazy, but also really exciting. So again, thinking about these projects based on not what we're approving now, but in the next several years, and not having to turn down a Lakeview who's a high water user because we don't have capacity for them. Being open enough to development and opportunity starts with some of this work here.
Well, that's a good lead in here to why would we be looking ahead and thinking about this? And that she mentioned it very well. It's proactive. I mean, that's exactly what we're doing here. Is we're trying to see things before they become more of an issue. You know, we have a number of fees and revenue coming in the door to pay back projects and efforts that ultimately are serving development of today. And all of those things are not done to serve development of today. We're not building a water treatment plant to serve up to next year. We're building a water treatment plant to serve for the next 10, 20 years. And so we had to pay for that. That's more expensive than it would have been if we just built just enough to handle the homes that are built today. But it's infinitely more expensive to build every year to keep up with capacity. So you go in increments, you build up this cost, and we have to pay it back in time. And so the big issue is trying to get to the point where we don't have a roadblock to development. And that's really what this is about. It's being proactive to make sure there's no roadblocks. So if we're looking forward, let's say the next 2 years, there's no need. Next 3 years, there's no need. The questions that we're answering here with the area charge, I would go so far as to say they will never go away. There's just, when do you answer them? To the north, it's just not going to be possible to answer the question to a developer's, how would I develop these 40 acres without telling them, well, there's an area charge, or this is how you do it with a lift station and a 16-inch force main, and how would you pay for that? Those are questions that are just going to be answered eventually. So really the thought is now the time to be more proactive about it, such that the charge system is set up for any time in the next however many years where development would be driven in these areas. So what would happen with no action? Well, of course, we always look at, well, worst case scenarios. You'd simply have no additional developable land at some point, and that's of course running to the worst case scenario, and some of the revenue might dry up because of lack of opportunities. Now that's driving to the worst. So like Aaron said, we're looking far ahead. So do other cities use this type of charge to fund projects? It's commonly used. It's all over the place. We have a similar example. Norwood Young America did it. Shakopee does it. Woodbury, Cottage Grove. All these cities have done it. There's varied complexity to each one of these. In some cases, you're cash flowing a project with the expectation that that's going to serve development and it'll pay back in time. That might be the position of the city, to cash flow it. Others, you can't cash flow it, and so you're doing just what we're doing here, which is distributing that cost over an extended area and paying it back with those charges, and that's what we're really going to be diving into today. We're not expecting to cash flow any of these, and so it's going to be a wide variety of communities and projects, both large and small. So legal authority here, I'm going to turn that over to you to brief refresher on this.
Yeah, and I know I went over this at the November workshop too, but cities are afforded the right under Chapter 444 of the legislature says that you can impose just and equitable charges to connect to municipal utilities. And when determining what might be just and equitable, the statute actually talks specifically about costs in establishing, enlarging, or extending systems, and that's exactly what you'd be doing here. You'd be extending the ability for these parcels to connect to city utilities. And there's nothing specific in the statute that says area-specific charges, but all the cities that do it read that into it. It's a perfectly reasonable interpretation of the statute, and I think that's a very good way to look at this and say, well, if we're going to extend sewer water to a specific area in town, it doesn't really make sense to spread those costs out against everybody, because many people might not be using them or might not benefit from them. So it's just and equitable to require those landowners who are going to connect to pay the costs. So legally, it's fine. That's why many cities do it. I don't see any issue at all with that. So it would just be a matter of, like we talked about, updating your fee schedule when the time comes.
Okay, so now we'll get into how that would actually work. More of an example calculation. So let's take the south area, extend trunk sewer and water to the Bigwood service area. this north area, sorry. Construct lift station, install force main back to 212, install water main back to Levi Griffin. That's just all the elements that would be associated with this. This is why if a developer asked us what would be necessary to move in here, it would be a bit overwhelming for them. And so the triggers would be, project financing, bond sale, for financial side of this, fund debt service with an enterprise fund, and then revenue stream generated with trunk area charges collected. So here's a simple example here. We're just using big round numbers. So it's $1 million total project cost, 5,700 equivalent residential units, $175 trunk area charge per ERU. So you'd be collecting an additional 175 under this model per equivalent residential unit. And as Aaron mentioned, that if it's a resident and it's one ERU, they would pay $175 more for that charge to connect to that unit. If it's a big commercial or industrial, that might have 40 ERUs. So you're going to take that 175, multiply it by 40, and that would be the charge that one larger property industrial unit might pay. And so again, as we've mentioned this is as the development is occurring. So you're cash flowing until that point.
I understand that this is a theoretical calculation, but is that a general idea? It's hundreds of dollars and not thousands of dollars that we're looking at for each area?
It'll be completely different between the two areas. So
Okay.
if I
Yes,
answered
they're
that,
both.
I would be wrong on both.
Okay, okay.
Okay. So,
I think 175 is pretty dang low though.
I feel that, well, that's kind of what I'm getting at.
My guess, and I don't know, this is my guess, given what other cities do, but it would be in between hundreds of dollars and thousands of dollars for what that's worth. I mean,
It's
probably
way more math than I
well,
get. I don't think
it-
that that's.
Well, ultimately, when you're trying to be strategic as a city about this, you want to make sure that when you're looking at total project costs and how much development area you have, you want to make sure you don't do something that's still going to be cost prohibitive for developers. And it depends on how much they're selling homes for, and that's changed significantly over the last few years because of the way the housing markets and now lumber costs and materials and all that is changing too. So it's going to be a very fluid, I think, calculation and study, which we'll be interested to see what it looks like. But I don't think there's any way to give you a great idea of what it will be
Okay.
yet. But that is pretty light, 175,
Okay.
really light.
Thank you.
So,
go ahead.
can you go back one slide? So just to make sure, I think this is what you're saying. So that red line of improvements that we would be making, that would be the project investment that we would bond for, right?
Yes.
And the trunk area charges would be applied to that entire tan area?
Yes.
Wow, so we're
That's-
splitting it up across
that's-
a wide swath of properties.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not
yeah.
just the ones you were talking to the property owners right adjacent to JCP, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is an example area, so we might, when Dan and Aaron do that study,
Sure.
based on what the total costs are, we might scale it back a little bit because the cost might become exorbitant to service the whole area from 11 to 43, for example.
Right.
And it will be that whole area, but if you think about where utilities will be,
Yeah.
it will need to be the people along that corridor first
Oh, for sure.
to get utilities through.
Yeah.
We still can't hopscotch.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and when we run through this, we kind of run through some different models, and we say, all right, well, if you get 80 acres of development, here's what you're going to be doing with debt service.
Right.
You run through a number of different scenarios, and quite frankly, get to the point where, all right, well, here's the sweet spot for what makes sense. But yes, in simple terms, the red serves the entire tan.
Okay.
And the tan will not go without the red.
Okay. Got it.
So-
Okay.
I would just add a big piece that we've been talking a lot about at the staff level too, is because I know there's some curiosity of where we end up, but in order that we don't overpromise and underdeliver, we really need to have Bolton and Nate do the study and have this, because there could be really big swings just based on topography and where certain things need to go, that making guesses or speculating on costs or area, I think will put us in harm's way.
For sure. Okay.
All right, so there's your example. So what is this study doing? I really call it more preliminary design, and then we need an estimate is what we need. We need to figure out what we would put in the ground, what size, where it would go, and then how much it would cost. The rest of the calculations get a little bit easier. It's your area and how many residents would be connecting, or it's the ERU calcs. But the most important thing is you have to know how much it's going to cost and where it's going to go. Those are two fundamental questions that are going to come up with every single developer discussion for the next 20 years. So and what is a little bit more complicating when I look at this, it's the north side is a harder one. To be honest with you, you're going to see that and the level of effort. It's more complicated for us. It's going to be the pipe alignments and sizing, which are a little bit more undefined up there. The hydraulic reviews for sewer, it gets very complicated when you get into a scenario where we're going to be putting in large pipes that are pumped. And that's going to be necessary for the entire service area. But the first developer can't pump through a gigantic pipe. And so you almost have to have a stage scenario that's put in the ground, that such as you have two pipes, one small, one big. And then they can connect on, use the small one for 5-10 years, and then the bigger one's there for the rest of the service area. So when it gets into pump systems, which your north one is, it's more complicated. And you have to be right, or you have a lot of infrastructure that doesn't work. And so that ultimately is the big one that has to be answered to the north side. The south side is more about where you put it in the ground. We know it's gravity, and we know how that one's going to work. We know the pipe sizes. It's more important where it goes and how much it's going to cost. So there's a slight difference between the two of them.
Is the pump because of the elevation or the density?
It's because of the elevation. It's got to go up though.
Okay.
So we just can't run gravity up there. So.
Okay.
So water mains is similar, but the sanitary side is the one that's a little bit more of a challenge. So all efforts would ultimately align with work that would be done in the future. Again, we're answering questions we'd be answering with the first developer. And so that's the thing, is you're more proactively answering those questions. And what they really care about is how much. So that's the question that you're really trying to get to at the end, is what does it mean to them from a cost perspective. And the area charge is usually a welcome option for them. If they could come in and cash flow it, then they might, just to move things forward, but with these numbers, we're not thinking that's going to happen. So estimated cost is probably about $50,000. It's quite a bit of effort here to get through that. The cost of infrastructure is in the many millions, so we're talking bigger numbers than the millions that we showed in our example. But again, we don't know that for a fact, but just given the length and size of these areas, that they're fairly large. So the way we would probably split this out legitimately is, again, I talked about the sanitary as being the hard side of this. That's where most of the effort would be going, is the sanitary side. It's going to be the north area, the pumping system, the staging, and so we're thinking about a majority of it would be from the sanitary fund, and then a smaller amount of it would be from the water fund, and then the fund balances would be a cash flowing study, as we've talked about at a staff level, is how we'd run through that. So ultimately, the next steps on this would be, well, I think we've kind of left it to the point where I think you know what this is, you know why we'd be doing it, and it's really a question about whether or not you would want to move forward and under what timeline you'd want to move forward with something like this. So hopefully we've answered the questions that would be relevant to this for you. And then ultimately from that point forward, it would probably be a council action to order the study. So at this point, we just want to answer questions and decide if you would want to see it at a council meeting.
My vote is yeah, I want to see it at a council meeting, but I have a couple questions.
Sure.
You said $50,000 is the price to do a study for both the north and the south.
Yep, altogether.
And then you also described that this study essentially is putting together kind of an engineering plan. So that wouldn't, if we do the plan for both north and south, it's not, I'm looking for you to confirm that it's not a poor use of money, because eventually the city will go forward with a north plan if we decide to go south and vice versa.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
all of these things are things that we would do, no matter what. If a developer came to town, we would do them. The only difference is, in some cases, the developer would pay for our expenses to actually answer these questions, but not at this magnitude.
Okay.
And so that's the issue. This is a lot for them to sort of test the waters on whether or not an area charge would be possible for them. So but most of the time, the developers might pay for some of our review expenses, but no, in this case, it's different.
Okay, so we'll spend $50,000 potentially in 2022 money, and we'll have a plan that we can eventually pull the trigger on in 2030 if we wanted to, for one of the areas that we decide not to do right away, potentially.
Yes, you would have preliminary design on where the system would be put in the ground, how much it would cost, and how it would be distributed. So, yes, and those are, again, they're things that will be answered sooner or later.
Okay. And then my only other question is the $15,000, is that written into our long-term financial plan?
No, but we have the capacity to take on something like that without it adversely impacting it.
Okay. Those are my questions. Council?
I have a kind of a detailed question after we pull the trigger on this. So so let's say we set up a trunk area charge for an area and we determine the amount. And we then bond because we're gonna go put in that infrastructure, right?
Mm.
Then let's say a property develops, so we collect that trunk area charge. Or can we only use those funds for repaying this bond? Do we put in a separate fund? How does the money work over time?
I don't know the answer. I'd be speculating on part of it. I'm assuming that we would, my preference would be that it would be
Right.
segregated.
Yes.
But I just don't know the detail of
Okay.
that.
But if we were to establish a trunk area after the study, it says, okay, we're gonna spend $5 million, I'm just gonna throw out a number to go do big woods. We establish an amount per unit, and then we go ahead and bond, we would
Yeah,
then
I
go
see
ahead
where
and
you're
bond,
going.
and we would
I'll
do the project, right?
Yeah. I'll use the south as an example, because I
Okay.
think it's more realistic as far as like having, we know somebody who owns
A
a
lot.
large area. We've complete the study, and let's say the south area is $1,000 per ERU. We talk to Summergate and they say, okay, we're interested. They develop a preliminary plat, and they say, we'll move forward with these, 300 homes, but we'd like this, in order for us to do this, we need the city to move forward. So there would be some type of step or staging process where we would feel pretty good, like, okay, development is imminent, even though they'd have to be kept on
For sure.
separate tracks.
Yeah.
And then, and then we'd go to the council and say, okay, let's
Go
pull the
on.
trigger on this bond,
Okay.
let's do the project. And then, fundamentally, you'd be in a position where that first development would maybe cash flow the debt service on that for the first
Couple years.
handful of years.
Yep.
And then, theoretically, additional development occurs that pays that off. You might have a couple of years in there where, the water reserve fund pays for that debt service because you don't have the incoming fees, or you could have a bunch where
Excess.
you start, building interest on that and you're good for a while, so. But in most cases, we want to be in a position, or in all cases, where we have this study, we feel like development is imminent, and that's kind of the impetus to move forward with the financing, the construction, et cetera.
Okay, that helps me with the sort of the timing of this from an execution perspective.
So when you say it's imminent though, so does that mean, that they're ready to go? Because we're gonna wanna put this all the way in and have nothing happen.
Yeah, when
Then,
sure, let me define it. Imminent would be, they're in here, they have concept plans developed. They've probably taken them through the planning commission and council, et cetera. And it's just a matter of like, will the city do the construction? It would, and this is dependent upon the level of risk. A council could say, to Aaron's analogy, like the Field of Dreams, if we build it, they will come. You've all been around long enough where when a developer decides they want to go, they want it to start last week. And so part of it is understanding the level of comfort that we have with moving forward, so you don't feel like you're being too risky, but you also feel like you're not disrupting an opportunity by waiting too long for a really definite commitment, because, and I talked a lot with Dave about this, the city still has an obligation to take someone through the land use process, kind of, and not have it impacted by a financial obligation that the city has to pay that debt service back, so you still want to have that level of transparency that if you don't like a plan based on whatever, it doesn't comply with your comp plan or it doesn't meet setbacks, etc., that you're not tied to it. Am I explaining this in the right way?
Yeah, I mean, you have to thread the needle, obviously. I mean, like Brent says, you want to make sure that this is there for developers, but if you don't do it, you might miss opportunities. And not only do developers want to start last week when they're ready to develop, but when they don't want to develop, they go silent. You're not going to hear from them. So it's really hard to gauge that.
That's a little bit of what makes me nervous, again, about putting the cart before the horse, is saying, well, if we build it, they will come. Well, lots of us didn't expect the downturn in the economy in 8 and 9, and the housing market crashed. What happens when we build this and all of a sudden we have something like that happen? Now we're on the hook for paying because we put it in ahead of time.
Right. Yeah.
And then, I mean, and that's a hefty amount of money to be
Right.
saddled to the city with.
Right.
And we can-
Saddled, good horse story.
Oh, good. Pulling through there.
I mean, we can still do the study, right, to understand and set up, right, the trunk area charge area, and then wait, right? And see what that means for the market, for buyers and sellers, right? And then if some momentum happens and we feel like there is imminent development, we feel like the conditions are good, the risk is less, then we can pull the trigger and say, let's go bond for it.
You know, and I would suggest maybe in a kind of an outline form, not maybe a formal document, but some type of process where you would establish some criteria as a council to say, in order for us to do this, we want to have these type of, I don't know if assurances is the right word, but we'd want to see a concept, we'd want to have a presentation from the developer, or whatever you
Right,
chose.
picture like milestones.
Yeah, because I think Chrissy brings up a good point with, this is a situation ripe for finger pointing if things go wrong, and
Yeah.
so, this is one where we want everyone in the boat kind of agreeing to like the direction that we're heading, the risks that we're taking, and the, opportunities that may or may not come to fruition.
Any other questions?
I have a fun, if we're talking about money here still. So remind me, so $50,000 for the study, where's that funding coming from again?
So we have, it would be from the general water fund, the general sanitary sewer fund. So there's, if you think about the special capital fund for the general fund, this is kind of our fund balance that we use. So these are unbudgeted dollars, but because of the capacity, what we would likely do is update our long-range financial plan next summer when we do it to incorporate these numbers. But when I say there's no adverse impact, taking $15,000 from the water fund isn't going to move the needle on what your connection fee or water rate should be.
Okay.
Well, not to pull back on the reins, but.
Oh.
He's
sitting on that for a while.
Yeah, it was.
Side saddle.
I think this is very proactive and I really like the concept. I understand people's hesitancy as far as what happens if. This area has been, this is one of the hottest markets in the state and one of the top in the country. And if there are, if with inflation and the economy and everybody, the indications that I've seen and heard from developers is that not, if you build it, they will come, but if you're going to show developers that you're willing to take a risk with them, chances are they will want to work with you to help things happen more so than, well, we're gonna back out of the deal. Because developers are always gonna wanna develop. Good times, bad times, they always want to develop because that's what they do.
Any questions?
No.
All right. I don't hear anyone saying they don't want to see this in January at a council meeting.
Correct.
And remember, in January, all you'd be doing, not all, but
Approving a
the
start.
only thing that you would be doing is approving the engineers to work on the costs and the estimates. So
Yep.
actually doing construction or when it would happen is,
That's not even thought of yet.
Yeah.
We just want, because like Dan said, we're gonna do this whether we do it now, whether you do it 10 years from now. But what it does is it throws a line into the water just to kind of make things happen.
I think this is smart, and I think I said this in November when we saw this, but I am so thankful that we have such a good staff to bring this to us, because I would bet that I'm not the only person in this room who would admit that trunk area fees were nowhere on my radar. And I didn't know what they were, I didn't know they were an option, so
I think about them every day.
for you guys.
you too.
That's why I left it open, to say everyone. So I appreciate you guys teeing this up and bringing this to us. It's gonna make us all collectively look really smart, I think, in a few years. So thank you. All right, moving on to the city manager's report.
I just have one thing. So there's a provision in our employee reference manual related to paid time off. So employees are given a certain amount of PTO based on their time with the city. But there's limited to the amount that they can carry over from one year to the next, because PTO is basically earned, so you can't take it away. It takes on a cash value, and if and when the employee leaves, it takes on the value, and they're paid out at the rate that they have when they leave. So you would want to have them have continuous PTO kind of year over year, just kind of build the bank. And so that's the reason for the rule. It's a kind of a cutoff. There have been situations where I've presented some information to the council where we've granted extensions. We have at least two specific situations where we've had folks take different types of leave throughout the year, where we've asked, and in some cases they've just done it on their own, but coordinated, where someone has stayed and not taken vacation because someone on their team is on a certain type of leave. What I'd like to offer, and I mentioned this to the mayor earlier in the day, is just to be equitable, just offer a 90-day extension into 2022 for all employees to carry over and to kind of use that remaining PTO, because right now it's a use it or lose it function for folks. And that way, I feel like we're being equitable to everybody and not just the kind of the handful of or the two instances that I'm aware of. There's probably folks that are maybe struggling to try to use that.
How much can they carry over?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. It's different for department heads and it's different for frontline
But-
folks.
Just as an example, like, you can carry over 2 weeks every year if you want to, but you can't carry over
Correct.
8 weeks.
Correct. It's something like that,
Okay.
correct. I believe it's 160, I think it's 4 weeks for department heads.
That's
and,
correct. They can carry over? Okay.
So, so this would just give them an additional 90 days. And my message would then be if approved by the council, would be to the departments, we want folks to take that PTO. We don't want to be in a position where in 2020, going into 2023, which seems like crazy, that we're going to be doing this every year. We want people to take that time, but with COVID and these two instances, I think we're kind of under some unique circumstances. So, and just based on this being our last meeting of the year, if the council's so inclined, I'd like to add that to the agenda tonight so that we can get Kathy in a position where she doesn't have to do multiple steps for her accounting software.
Fine with me.
Yeah, I'm fine, yes.
Yes.
Sounds good. That's it?
That's all I have.
Okay, we will put council requests on the regular agenda, and then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Councilmember McKnight.
Second.
And photo finish. I saw Lori. So second by Councilmember Sayer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those same sign.
And
Motion passes. Motion passes.
Yep.